And here are some guidelines for modeling ourselves after angels when it comes to successful communications. Make a habit of telling the truth, and be a person others can trust. Enjoy the spontaneity of conversation. You don't have to think about everything you say before you say it if you've already developed a habit of speaking affirmatively and with goodwill. But give thought to what and how you intend to say something, if it's really important or if you're concerned about how someone else will react to it. Be prepared to explain yourself without impatience if what you've said doesn't seem to have been understood. Listen. Be sure you understand what's being said to you. Find a vocabulary with which to express your emotions, such as joy, fear, and anger. Children often express their feelings primarily through their behavior. As they grow up, one of their primary tasks as adolescents is to learn how to do so verbally rather than by what's called acting out. Bullying other kids in the schoolyard, stealing costume jewelry in a department store, refusing to study for exams and getting Fs, instead of being able to voice their frustrations in constructive ways. Many adults also have trouble putting their emotions into words. If you have trouble in your marriage, facing up to it and talking it out is much better than involving yourself in a clandestine affair, or just refusing to communicate at all. If you're having difficulties at work, speaking about them in search of solutions beats coming home and pounding the wall with your fists or engaging in so-called passive-aggressive behavior, like frequently coming in late, provoking your boss, or sneaking cigarettes in the washroom of a smoke-free workplace. Learn to appreciate the power and beauty of language. It took thousands of years for language to evolve to the point that Shakespeare could write Romeo and Juliet, Kenneth Grahame, The Wind in the Willows. Winston Churchill's eloquence was one of the Allies' most potent weapons in World War II, even as Adolf Hitler's mesmerizing rhetoric persuasively spewed out his messages of evil. Even Humphrey Bogart's line at the end of the film Casablanca, "Here's looking at you, kid," has its own down-to-earth dignity. This is not to imply that we must become masters of the art. But the more you appreciate what a wonderful gift language is, the more you'll be able to use it effectively and avoid descending to the lowest common denominator and interrupt every other sentence with four-letter vulgarities. Accentuate the positive. Observe the old adage that if you don't have something good to say, don't say anything. Praise behavior that deserves praise. Critique when it's appropriate for you to do so, but don't engage in destructive criticism or nastiness or be an eager messenger of defamation. Pay attention to what you communicate non-verbally, and be sure your stance, gestures, and overall behavior are consistent with your words. And learn to smile, since smiling goes so far toward making everyone comfortable, including yourself. And finally, pray. Pray silently. Pray out loud. Pray when you're in trouble. Pray when you're not in trouble. Pray alone. Pray with others. Pray the prayers given us to pray, the Psalms of David, the Lord's Prayer. Pray casual prayers that you've made up yourself. Make your work a prayer. Make your relationships with others a prayer. Make your life a prayer. The fifth strength, a mission to guide and protect.
"It's a little anxious, Piglet, said to himself, to be a very small animal, entirely surrounded by water. I wonder what Christopher Robin would do." Then suddenly he remembered a story which Christopher Robin had told him about a man on a desert island who had written something in a bottle and thrown it in the sea. And Piglet thought that if he wrote something in a bottle and threw it in the water, perhaps somebody would come and rescue him. Winnie the Pooh, A. Milne.
In the film The Edge, Charles, played by Anthony Hopkins, saves himself by following a few very rudimentary guidelines in a book on finding one's way out of any wilderness. He would have saved his two companions as well, if one had not been dismembered by a bear and the other had not died from injuries sustained when he fell into a pit. Angels are known to have a remarkable sense of direction, which they often use on our behalf. If you think of people modeling themselves after angels, Charles was working overtime, engaged in one of the routine jobs that angels do, to lead and guide. What's true for driving your car cross-country or traveling in a foreign land is no less true for your entire life. Where am I going is a question most of us ask at various stages of our lives. Helping us answer this question is what guardian angels do, sometimes by whispering softly in our ears, sometimes by placing opportunity in our path, like a road sign that we can choose to follow or not. Responding to angel messages is not obligatory. The choice is always yours. Just think of the countless ways in which every one of us is called upon to exert leadership. Parents lead their children, teachers lead their students, priests, ministers, and rabbis lead the members of their congregations. Supervisors lead those who work under them, from the top of the organization down. Generals, admirals, staff sergeants, bosun's mates, Boy Scout leaders, Little League coaches, vocational guidance counselors, politicians, statespersons. In every one of these arenas, we have the chance to become more angel-like in our performance. There's probably no more important leadership post than that of parent, and a great deal more goes into bringing up children than just providing them with a roof over their heads and 3 square meals a day. The parent who wants to follow in the footsteps of angels will help each child develop his or her intellect, will, and spirituality. And there are other things to look after, too, that don't have much of a bearing on angel behavior, like toilet training, nutrition, or teaching a youngster how to ride a bike. But foremost in a parent's mind should be teaching one's child to know how to know, to experience the joy of discovery. When one of my sons was less than 2 years old, we put signs around his room identifying objects with written names: bed, dresser, table, lamp, book, window, door, and the like. He had fun with it and learned to read well ahead of many children his age. I also recalled playing games with my children, such as assembling a cardboard grocery store and pretending to be shopkeeper and customer for an hour at a time. Once they began school, we never failed to praise them for their work well done, something I learned the importance of from my own upbringing. I recall that when one of my daughters was 4, she started a preschool program a block away from home. I walked her there in the mornings, holding her hand. Sometimes she'd let go of my hand when we arrived and go upstairs one flight to her classroom by herself. Other times she wouldn't let go, pulling me with her, signaling that she wanted me to walk up too, and maybe even stay there for a while. I let her make the choice, respecting her desire for independence as well as her need to still be the little girl. I have no doubt it strengthened her will. The context of the guidance a parent gives changes with the years. One morning you wake up and suddenly your little girl or boy is practically an adult. You're still very much needed, even if this would-be grown-up doesn't like the idea very much. Diplomatically make it known that you're always available to offer advice about relationships, friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, sex, college admissions, and the direction they'll take in their work and careers. Keep in mind that you do still know a lot they don't know, even if they think they do. The challenge now is to maintain channels of communication, which you can learn something about from angels, and to know how to mix setting limits, which they absolutely require, with a genuine respect for their urge toward independence. Acknowledge the fact that you may be able to learn something from them, and do all this in the spirit of love, with a willingness to forgive and wish everyone well. Wishing everyone well has never been a more important need, considering how many children are raised in single-parent homes. Divorced parents too often hold on to an anger and disdain for one another that may have led to the divorce in the first place. Unforgiving, they speak and behave in derogatory ways toward each other, sometimes for years. And the primary victims of this hate are their children. How much more fruitful and angel-like it would be for divorced mothers and fathers to acknowledge that their children have 2 parents whom they must respect in order to get on with their lives in a healthy way. Leadership in the family is only the beginning of your opportunities to learn from the angels how to guide. No matter what profession you're in or at what level of an organization you find yourself, you're going to be called upon to be a model for others, helping them do their jobs more effectively, motivating them to use their talents and become the best they can at what they do. A Marine captain can learn as much from angels as a rehabilitation therapist, helping the wounded to walk again. Don't make the mistake of thinking of angels as softies either. They're not. They're tough as any soldier, tougher maybe. But good angels, and those are the ones I'm obviously talking about, are committed to what is genuinely good. You could hardly imagine angels as leaders waving their arms in the air and directing a group of skiers toward a patch of thin ice that will collapse under their weight and plunge them hundreds of feet into a deep crevasse to their deaths. We also must be concerned about the direction in which we are leading those whom we live with, work with, and play with. The mission of any group or organization of which you're in charge should be something worthwhile and consistent with the highest purposes of being human. Now, this doesn't mean you have to quit being the manager of an automobile showroom and run off to become a social worker in Central America. It means you should be selling cars that are as safe as possible to drive and will hold up reasonably well, asking a fair price, dealing honestly with your customers, and servicing them effectively after they've purchased an automobile from you. If you're not happy with the quality of your product, let the manufacturer know and keep after them to do something about it. Mentoring is a vital form of guidance. It may be one of the most angel-like activities that we all have a chance to pursue. A mentor is someone who helps someone else grow to his or her potential. The direction and encouragement a mentor gives is based on a genuine understanding of who and what someone is now and what he or she can become. It's motivated by altruism. It involves giving another person time and thought and sharing one's own experiences and wisdom with that person. I personally owe much to my own mentors over the years of my apprenticeship in life. Now, we're told of angel encounters, and when we are told of them, what we hear about most is saving people from peril. Not too long ago, when I was speaking with a close friend of mine, Norman, about being involved in writing this angel book, he suddenly recalled what may have been 2 angel interventions in his life. I used to think of it as ESP, he said, but now that we're talking about angels, maybe. Norman was a Navy fighter pilot in the Second World War. During training exercises at Pensacola, Florida, a gunnery practice run involved a group of 5 planes, one at a time, shooting at a moving target being towed behind a 6th member of the squadron. It was Norman's turn to split off from the formation at 6,000 feet and dive down toward the sleeve 2,000 feet below, machine guns roaring. Quickly, he was below the target. It was time to pull up out of his dive. Just before doing so, however, pilots routinely blacked out, but they were so well trained that they would automatically point the plane upward even before fully regaining consciousness. Norman did so. Suddenly, as if in a daze, he caught sight of another plane, no more than 30 feet in front of him. He could even make out its propeller. The next pilot who was to make the run hadn't waited the full 60 seconds he was supposed to. He had begun his dive prematurely. And there he was, coming in on the target as Norman was pulling up. A mid-air collision seemed inevitable. With seconds to spare, Norman instinctively put the nose of his plane down and dove toward the water 4,000 feet below before leveling off. It was not until he had landed at the base that the full impact of the experience struck him, and he felt the terror of it. "I can't explain what happened," Norman told me. "We should have been killed. Was it angel intervention?" His next recollection involved driving with his 2 young sons along a 2-lane highway north of New York. They'd been to a party, but Norman had had nothing to drink and he wasn't tired. It was evening and beginning to get dark. Suddenly, with neither rhyme nor reason, he pulled off the road onto the shoulder and stopped his car. Seconds later, 2 cars rounded a curve up ahead and plummeted toward him. One was passing the other. The headlights momentarily blinded him. As they roared past, he realized that if he had not pulled off the road, he and his sons would undoubtedly have been seriously injured or killed. That might well have been angels, too, this very bright, worldly wise, and certainly spiritual friend of mine suggested, looking more than a little pleased by the thought. We're all protectors, whether you're a parent telling your children to fasten safety belts or wear a life jacket in the boat, or a homeowner locking the windows and doors at night so prowlers can't get into your home. On more than one occasion, you may find yourself standing up for friends when others attack them unfairly, or you may find yourself saving them from themselves, as when you encourage them to give up smoking or cut back on their drinking or look after their health or pay more serious attention to their work lest they lose their jobs. We all serve as crossing guards. Of course, maybe you really do protect people professionally. Maybe you're a policeman, an FBI agent, an officer in the Army, a fireman, or a member of an emergency rescue team. If so, have you ever thought of the fact that you walk in the footsteps of angels? Or rather, you can walk that way if you choose to. Doing so will help you resist any temptations to abuse your authority or to be brutal in your dealings with people. Power, which sometimes involves carrying a gun, is morally neutral. It's how you use that power that counts. You must act as angels do, firmly, decisively, when you're called on to protect others or yourself. When I told a patient of mine, whom I have known on and off for more than 30 years, that I was writing a book about angels, he smiled. Now, I knew he didn't believe in angels, or in God for that matter, although he was open-minded enough to allow the possibility of both. Suddenly he looked startled. He said, "I just remembered something that happened to me years ago when I was skiing in Switzerland. I'd left the main trail. Feeling a bit adventuresome, I suppose. I thought I could get back down the slopes more quickly that way. But I fell and sprained my ankle. It was late in the afternoon, bitter cold. I was really scared. I had little hope that the ski patrol would find me so far off the regular paths. It was getting dark, and I was certain I'd freeze to death up there all alone. Then, all of a sudden, at the top of the slope, I could see two figures skiing steadily toward me. As they came closer, I could see their uniforms. I knew I'd be rescued. I asked him if they said anything to him. Only that I'd been foolish, he replied. Nothing else that I can remember. They just went about putting me on a sled and towing me downhill back to the village and the first aid station. Funny, even though they pulled me over bumps and small crevices, it was a strangely smooth ride. What happened when you got back to the village? I asked. Nothing special. They took off. I never saw them again. Did you get their names? Yes, but I don't remember. He smiled again. Maybe they were angels, or members of a ski patrol sent to help me by angels. But you don't believe in God or angels, I said. Why would they bother to help you? I asked, jokingly. He laughed. Maybe because I had a doctor who did believe. Here are some guidelines for modeling ourselves after angels to guide and protect. First, identify your leadership opportunities and responsibilities. Some careers obviously involve protecting and rescuing, like being a policeman or a fireman. In other careers, the mission to guide and protect may be less obvious, but no less real. You may be a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer. You may be a parent. You may be a protector of trees. Make out a list of those who need your guidance and protection, and don't forget aging parents and friends who are going through terrible crises in their lives. If you're a parent, raise your children the way all children deserve to be raised. That means not only attending to their physical needs, but giving them love and inspiration. Keep in mind they will use you as a model, so be the kind of model that will allow them to grow up to be successful human beings. Help them cultivate their talents. Encourage them to do well in whatever they choose to do. Offer them spiritual leadership, especially by the values you hold and the examples you present. Teach them how to pray, and now and then remind them of angels. Whether you're a teacher, a minister, a business manager, or a captain of the Marines, instill a spirit of virtue and a dedication to excellence in all those who look to you for direction. Be a mentor, Make yourself available and let them know you're available to your children, your spouse, your friends, the people with whom you work, the students you teach, to whomever it seems appropriate, to offer guidance and advice that can help them develop their abilities to their fullest and embrace the kind of values that will assure them a virtuous and meaningful journey through life. But don't rush in where angels fear to tread. In your efforts to help others, don't overprotect them or go beyond your own limitations. Make no promises on which you can't deliver. And don't get embroiled in destructive relationships with people who, in their own determined effort to drown themselves, seem insistent that those who reach out to help them drown as well. Be careful about making citizens arrests, and leave the tough cases to the professionals. Go strictly by the book. Always observe the rules of moral behavior. If you're a policeman, this means no more Rodney Kings. Don't drink when driving, and never take advantage of those who, in their time of weakness, turn to you for help, or whose admiration for you makes them especially susceptible to your will. Know where you're leading everyone, and be sure it's a place worth going to, one pleasing to the unseen angels who will be with you all the way. The sixth strength, helping and healing.
When a flood of sick came in, she was on her feet all day. She was known to spend 8 hours on her knees dressing wounds, and she would work the clock round. She never let a man she had tended die alone. She estimated that during the winter she witnessed 2,000 deaths. There was never a severe case that escaped her notice. She did her rounds every night, carrying her lantern, which she would set down before she bent down over any of the patients. What a comfort it was to see her pass even, wrote a soldier. She would speak to one, and nod, and smile to as many more. But she could not do it all, you know. We lay there by hundreds, but we could kiss her shadow as it fell and lay our heads on the pillow again, content. Florence Nightingale, the young heroine in Creative Malady, Sir George Pickering.
Raphael is said to be the angel of healing, but I'm sure he has plenty of help from the rest of the angels, and could use some from us as well. Perhaps you may be asking, what can I do? I'm not a trained doctor or nurse or even a psychotherapist. I don't have any special healing powers. I even get sick at the sight of blood. How can I be a healer? If that's the way you think, you need to broaden your definition of healing, because there's much more to helping others overcome sickness of mind, body, and soul than performing surgery or prescribing medication. Only a small number of us will train to be professionals, but all of us can develop angel-like skills to help others overcome the weaknesses to which flesh is heir and the profound heartaches that few of us escape in the course of our lives. There are 5 angel attributes that we can cultivate to help us achieve this goal. Inspiring hope, being comforting and supporting, restoring morale to help one regain command of one's life, empathizing, and forgiving. To inspire hope. Hope is an optimistic attitude toward the future. I will get better. I will get a good job. I will find a new love. Hope is a powerfully positive feeling. But it's not Pollyannish. True hope must be rooted in reality. Hoping for things that are inherently impossible can be an exercise in futility. Hope requires that there be at least a slim likelihood that what you hope for can be attained, even if that occasionally requires a miracle. Even if you're suffering with a fatal illness, you can be hopeful that the time remaining to you may be quality time, an opportunity to be with those you love, a chance to reassess life's meaning and pay some attention to your spiritual self. There are a number of ways to reinforce hope. If you're dealing with a serious illness, carefully select the doctors, trust them, ask to be adequately informed about what's wrong with you and what's going to be done for you and what your chances for recovery are. I find that patients who take an active role in their treatment have a greater sense of hope than those who don't. Whatever your problems may be, don't give up. Keep on trying until you find the answers you've been looking for, including ones that you may never have dreamed of when you began. I know a young man who had lost his management position and had been out of work for nearly 2 years. He was married and had 2 children. His wife worked. She was their sole support. At the end of the day, he'd frequently feel defeated, as if he'd never succeed in getting the kind of job he wanted, especially after a string of interviews with people who said they'd call him back but never did, and trip after trip to employment agencies and headhunters who told him they didn't have anything that quite fit his skills and experience. But every morning he'd get up and head for the phone and make some calls, and he kept going. He did not give up hope. Then one day he answered his 100th or so job ad in the New York Times. It wasn't quite what he'd been looking for. It involved computer software sales. He knew something about software, but he'd never considered a sales job in his life, and he wasn't sure he could succeed at that. But he was desperate. Before his interview, he went to the local library and took out 6 training videos on sales strategies so that he'd be better prepared. The sales manager who interviewed him was so impressed by his enterprise that he hired him on the spot. That was 3 years ago. Since then, he's become the company's star salesperson. It's important to note that during this ordeal, he had the continuing support of his wife, his family, his friends, and whether he realized it or not, his guardian angel. To comfort and support. One of the easiest angel attributes to emulate is being there for others when they need you. Numerous studies have proven that people who have people have a significantly better chance of recovering from physical or mental illness and staying well than those who don't. My hunch is that you're already giving your support to a lot of people whom you know, giving them someone to talk with when they're upset, visiting them in hospitals or convalescent homes, spending the time with them that makes them feel loved, respected, and hopeful. The secret of being effectively supportive is knowing how to give encouragement. You can do it, a step at a time. Easy now. Good. That's very good. Yes. These words sound like a physical therapist helping a patient walk again after a serious accident. But they reflect an attitude that you can assume in helping anyone, anywhere, with anything. You're going to do just fine in tomorrow's examination. You've put plenty of time into studying. Just read the questions carefully and take your time. Or, let's go over the numbers again and see how you might be able to get rid of some of these debts, and we'll make out a budget so you can turn things around once and for all. One reason why there seem to be more angels around these days may be because we so much need their support. There's one angel activity that has never before been so effective and so widespread: the support group. There are support groups for breast cancer patients and families of Alzheimer victims, for people trying to give up smoking or alcohol, for people suffering with depression, for men with prostate cancer, for victims of spousal abuse, and for people who are adopted as children, to mention but a few. And the thought occurs to me, where did the inspiration come from to set these up? One of the goals of instilling hope and providing support is to help us regain command over ourselves and our lives when illness or adverse life events have made us feel helpless. You know, helplessness can be viewed as a medical emergency. Scientific studies have shown that feeling helpless can wreak havoc with your body as well as your mind. In prisoner of war camps, the soldiers who had the best chance for survival were those who continued to live within the framework of military protocol and stuck together throughout the ordeal. Life continued in an organized way, giving them a sense of being in command, even though this coherence extended no farther than the barbed wire fences that surrounded them. People who are involved in a helpless struggle to get away from someone or some situation that's very troubling are often angry and frustrated, and they appear to be far more vulnerable to dying of heart attacks. People whose sense of helplessness stems from wanting someone or something desperately, while feeling that that person or thing is permanently unattainable, appear to be much more vulnerable to developing cancer. Helplessness, worry, futility conspire to suppress the immune system and make us more likely to fall ill. That's probably why you and I are more likely to get a bad cold or the flu when we're under severe stress and strain. 3 of the most effective methods to get back in command again are to restore morale. What psychiatrist Jerome Frank once said is at the very heart of effective psychological therapy. To regain perspective and to face reality for what it is. And no matter how bad things may be, accepting reality is the first step toward making things better. In my own experience, one of the surest ways to restore morale is to find a rational explanation for what I'm experiencing. I find that piecing things together, making a connection between some particular upsetting event and feelings that have been tearing me apart, helps relieve the fear of not knowing what's happening to me or thinking I'm headed for a nervous breakdown. And another way I restore morale is to let go of any embarrassment or shame I may feel for being so distressed. Now that may sound odd to those of you who cry easily and without self-consciousness, but many people have been brought up to feel that certain feelings, like fear or depression, are a sign of weakness. So if we're frightened or depressed, it must mean we're weak, and that's something we feel embarrassed about. It isn't, of course. Any good Marine can tell you that not to be afraid going into battle is lunacy. You forge ahead in spite of your fear, and it's called courage. And if when it's over you cry for your buddies who've been killed, it's a sign of real manhood and something to be proud of. Perspective is often lost when you're feeling helpless and most vulnerable. It seems as if all time is now, and now is awful, and tomorrow doesn't look much better. If you find yourself feeling that way, stop and look back. Think of times when you were confident and happy and going somewhere that you wanted to be going. You were successful then. You can be successful again. If you're wanting what you can't ever have, remember that you've been happy before without it. And if you feel helplessly trapped in a job or relationship that's making you feel frustrated and angry, say to yourself, anything is better than this, and take your first step toward radically changing your attitude toward the people and situations that are upsetting you, or break away altogether. Accepting, or helping someone else to accept, the predicament you're in for what it is the necessary first step toward finding a cure. It's like a doctor making a diagnosis. A number of years ago, I was told that my prostate-specific antigen test was higher than it should be. So I had a sonogram and a biopsy of my prostate. The 5 days that followed while I waited for the results seemed interminable. I felt anxious, frightened, helpless. When I was told it was malignant, I felt a strange sense of relief. I'd rather it had not been. But now that I knew what I was dealing with, I went ahead to schedule surgery, and things seem to have been fine ever since. The most powerful gift you can use to help someone to feel better is empathy. The angel who comforted Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane must have been empathic. It was not that he could have known from experience what Jesus was going through. He'd never been human. He'd never been God either, and many, such as myself, believe that Jesus is divine, the Son of God. All that the angel could fall back on to empathize with Jesus then was the angel's intellect, knowing what Jesus was experiencing, and thereby offering him solace as he had been bidden to do. Angels also know that an angel appearance can be very scary to people, so they're careful to reassure those who witness one not to be afraid. I've seen empathy work wonders, so often and so regularly that I'm convinced of its central role in healing mind, body, and spirit. Empathy transcends compassion and sympathy. It involves experiencing vicariously what another person is experiencing for real. But how can you really know what a person means when he or she says, "I'm in love," if you've never been in love yourself? Even then, being in love may not have the same meaning for you as for him or her, but how can you reach out empathically to comfort someone who's grieving unless you've known what it is to lose something or someone you cared for deeply? How can you share in the moment of victory, winning a significant promotion, a championship tennis tournament, a long and bloody legal battle, if you don't know what it is to win yourself? Well, you can, if you value and emulate the example of knowing set by the angels. Life experience is the primary source of empathic power, but you can use your imagination, too, to richly and correctly feel what a particular human experience is like without necessarily having had to go through it. You can extrapolate from similar experiences. You may not know what it's like suddenly to lose a wife in her mid-40s of a heart attack, but you know how you felt when your mother or father or someone else close to you died, and from this you can draw conclusions about how the other person must feel. Or you can draw on observations to make certain concepts and feelings part of your repertoire. You know what it's like to read a gripping novel or see a profoundly moving film. The intensity of your involvement in the plot and characters is a function of your capacity for vicarious experience. That involvement is a pretense, of course, and you know it's a pretense, but for the moment it can seem very real, and the memory of it can endure to help you empathize with real people going through similar moments in their lives. The gift of forgiveness. It's taken me years to come to appreciate the healing power of forgiveness. Few things corrode body and spirit as surely as old grievances, hurts, and resentments. The only remedy is forgiveness. And if you wonder whether angels forgive, you need only ask yourself how often you think your guardian angel has had to forgive you, and stay there in your corner, bopping your brow, putting lotion on your injuries, and getting you ready to go back for the next round. There are several things that will help you understand the nature of forgiveness better. First, it doesn't involve denying the hurts you've suffered, whether real or exaggerated. Quite the contrary. The process requires you to look into yourself and admit to the sadness or anger that you feel. The next step entails looking at an incident in a different light, securing a deeper understanding of the motives of the person whose words or actions were the source of your pain. Were they intentional or unintentional? Were they the result of carelessness, insensitivity, stupidity, or downright meanness? Why do you think they behaved that way? Might you have done something to invite such behavior? Once you've answered these kinds of questions, it's time to let go. Each of us letting go in his or her own way. I mean, you might take a deep breath and resolve to stop thinking about your wounds. Or you might shake yourself all over as if getting rid of a heavy burden you've been carrying. Or you might just say, "I forgive you," quietly to yourself. Forgiveness is always something you really do for your own sake, not for the sake of others. They may never know whether you've forgiven them or not. And it doesn't have anything to do with whether you decide to continue a relationship as it's been, or to alter it as a result of what you've been through, or to end it once and for all. Forgiving and moving on is called reconciliation. For example, you may decide that the person who hurt your feelings acted out of ignorance, and once you've forgiven him or her, you're ready to go on with the relationship, maybe after a little talk about what took place. Or you may decide that the person whom you had thought of as a friend never was a friend at all, but acted out of selfishness, and that you're better off without him or her. Sometime love deserves to prevail, and it does, with misunderstanding setting the stage for new understanding and forgiveness giving rise to greater intimacy and trust. Now here are some guidelines for modeling ourselves after angels to heal. Angels are spirits of action, so always be prepared to offer a helping hand. This might mean spending a few days with your daughter to help her care for a newborn, or with your husband or wife who's just returned from the hospital after major surgery, or lending someone money to help him get his life together again, or driving an elderly neighbor to the supermarket. Inspire hope. Focus attention on the best of the past, present, and future. Help people understand what's going on and what they can do about it so they can get back in command of their lives. Avoid behavior that makes people feel worse, such as putting them down, criticizing their ideas, finding fault with them, and closing the doors to imagination and unforeseen possibilities that may hold enormous promise. Become a confidant to at least one person you know. Let those who confide in you know you're there for them, that the door is always open if they wish to turn to you to share happiness or sorrow. Assure them by your actions and reactions that they can reveal themselves to you without humiliation and without fear of being controlled or taken advantage of. Assure them, too, that what they tell you will be held in the strictest confidence. That's what a confidant is. Develop a habit of empathy and use it to heal. Understand what others are experiencing in their lives. Listen to them carefully and in a non-judgmental fashion. Look into yourself to discover how their experiences may correspond to your own past experiences with similar feelings and events. Make phone calls or send notes to people you know to be sick, recovering from an illness or disabled. Dropping by to see them is even better, if it's the appropriate thing to do and if you can. Include people you don't necessarily know that well in your helping and healing efforts. Volunteer to make somebody happy. A few weeks ago, I went to see a patient of mine in a nursing home. The garden was filled with dogs doing an assortment of tricks, one at a time. 20 or so patients sat around watching with delight. The dogs' owners had taken time away from their other activities to go there to the nursing home and devote a few hours to cheering everybody up. I'm sure you know that animals have a way of doing that. And if you attend church, join the congregation in their prayers for the sick. And if you don't, pray for them anyway. Fight stigma. I remember when I was 10 years old, my mother had to have a minor operation to remove a tumor of her parotid gland. That's a gland in the mouth that helps digest food, and it appears as a swelling at the base of the jaw. In those days, the stigma surrounding cancer was very strong, and although she didn't have cancer, the doctor who was going to perform the procedure was known as a cancer specialist. So my father arranged for her to be admitted surreptitiously the night before the surgery. She was discharged the next afternoon, and no one was the wiser. Today, it's mental illness that's heavily stigmatized. Less than it once was, but still quite prevalently. Even something as commonplace as clinical depression, for which we doctors can do a great deal, is considered a weakness or a serious mental aberration by more than 50% of Americans. So if you know anyone suffering with a psychiatric problem, give them the same support and respect you'd give anyone else, and actively encourage them in their efforts to seek help and to recover. And if there's anyone you haven't yet forgiven, take a minute to forgive them now. Let go of old hurts and grievances. You'll not only heal yourself by doing so, but you'll set a wonderful example for others to follow. The seventh strength, becoming a more spiritual person. It's sometimes hard to believe that we're spiritual beings. Sitting in front of a computer all day long, entering and retrieving data, watching the evidence of human cruelty on the nightly news, witnessing the small insensitivities and slights that people seem to exchange regularly with each other, being confronted with rudeness, belligerence, selfishness, and greed at every turn, contrasting the opulent mansions of the Hamptons, Nantucket, Beverly Hills, Malibu, and 100 other places around the world with the dire poverty of city ghettos and the disease-riddled jungles and deserts of underdeveloped nations, being exposed to improprieties, legal wrangling, and lust among politicians, sadly realizing how family life has become so fragmented, watching the steady, ongoing destruction of our natural habitat, the Earth, and hearing of the resurgence of the nuclear arms race. How can we really think that human beings are even slightly spiritual? It's even hard sometimes to feel that way in church. And yet, in spite of all the evil around us, most people still do believe in God and in humankind's eternal destiny. That so many people believe doesn't make it true. But the fact that this belief has persisted from the beginning of known time, and that it has been embraced by a great many minds, a good deal more intelligent than mine, is to me sufficient evidence that there must be something to it. Then, too, you have angel manifestations that can't be explained without acknowledging that both they and we share a common bond of spirituality.